I want to start with something that I almost can't believe even happened. It's from a news headline from this past March, and the headline read, "Michigan woman's auto payments hid her death for over 5 years." And I printed out the article, and here's what the article said. For years, the payments went out of the woman's bank account. Nobody batted an eyelid. Life went on in the normal, quiet neighborhood of Pontiac, Michigan. The woman traveled a lot, neighbors said, so they didn't notice anything unusual. One of them mowed her grass to keep things looking tidy. At some point, her bank account ran dry and the bills stopped being paid, and the bank foreclosed on the house. Still, nobody noticed what had happened inside the house. Nobody wondered out loud what had become of the owner. It wasn't until a worker sent by the bank to repair a hole in the roof that they discovered her in the garage. The woman's mummified body was sitting in her car. Authorities say they believe the woman had died at least 5 years ago. 5 years. I mean, when you hear a story like that, it's just unbelievable. And I find myself kind of asking, how could nobody have missed this woman? It wasn't an elderly woman like the rest of her family had passed. She was in her 40s. How could no one have noticed that she was gone? Why weren't there any kind of relational circles in her life where her absence left this gaping hole? Well, thankfully, these stories are so shocking because I think, for the most part, they're very rare. And hopefully every one of us here, we could name lots of people who would notice if we kind of suddenly disappeared. And even as individualistic as we Americans tend to be, I think we still think of ourselves as being a part of groups of people. What a lot of people are actually calling these days, tribes. And belonging to tribes has always been a part of God's plan for a meaningful and fulfilling life. From His declaration in the Garden of Eden in Genesis, where He said, "It's not good for man to be alone," to God setting apart His nation, and then organizing that nation into 12, wait for it, what was it, 12 what? Tribes. To the new nation that was ushered in by Jesus, where we gather together in these tribes called the church. See, God's plan has always been for us to experience belonging in tribes. So here's what we're going to do. As we wrap up the third week in our series, Losing Your Marbles, we've been talking about making the difference in the lives of kids, both our own kids, but also the kids in our extended families, in our neighborhoods, in our church here, and also in our community. Now, when you came in today, you should have received a marble like this one, okay? And if you got your marble, go ahead and hold it out there. Go ahead. And what I want you to do is kind of roll it around on your fingertips there, roll it around across the palm of your hand. I want you to feel that marble, because this marble is going to have, again, this week, a very important lesson for you. What I want you to do is I want you to imagine a container with 936 of these marbles, right? 936. Why? Because there's 936 weeks in the life of the child, from the time he or she is born until the time that child graduates from high school. Now, what I've asked you to do is I want you to imagine that there's one marble for each of those weeks. And every week, you lose a marble as time passes you by. And eventually what will happen? All 936 marbles will be gone. And here's our challenge. Our challenge is to make sure that when that container is empty, the child's life is full. Now, when you think about the child in your life, maybe that child that you love, is there anything more important for them than them to have a secure, kind of genuine sense of belonging? Every week, and really every day. Particularly if you're a parent. I know as a parent, you're consistently looking for these tribes where your kid can belong. I remember when our oldest Amy was getting ready to go off to kindergarten, Sue and I, we wanted exactly that kind of belonging for her in a school. So, we considered every possible option. Would we send her to public schools? Would we homeschool? Would we send her to a private school or a Christian school? And so we made several trips to observe these different kinds of schools. And of course, being first-time parents and slightly overprotective, we left many of those experiences kind of shaking our heads saying, no way. We saw the kids, they were making fun of each other. Or they picked on each other at this place. Or they kind of bullied each other here. And we didn't want that for our little girl. Then we went to Mrs. Yankee's kindergarten class. I'll tell you what, I'll never forget what I saw in Mrs. Yankee's class. If I remember right, it was a Friday. And on Fridays in Mrs. Yankee's class, they did kind of a show and tell. But it was unlike any other show and tell that I'd seen before. Kids didn't just bring stuff that they collected or things that they prized from home to kind of show off. But instead, Mrs. Yankee had them do something completely different. She set all these 5-year-olds in a big circle. And then one of the kindergartners that she'd selected beforehand got to enter the center of that circle and display their special talent. Well, on this particular Friday, and as we were just observing, it was this little blonde-haired girl who entered into the circle wearing her ballerina tutu with all her peers sitting around her, looking at her. Mrs. Yankee then told the group that this little girl had a very special talent, and that in fact God had given every one of them in this circle a special talent that He meant to be used for the enjoyment of good or the enjoyment of other people. Well, with that, the little girl, she just took this incredible risk. Music began to play, and she began to dance. She started dancing just all by herself, all alone, in front of this room full of 5-year-old kids. And we all watched. I watched. And it was, what I saw was amazing. And to be honest, not so much the dancing, but what was actually happening in that room. When she finished her dance, Mrs. Yankee had a little girl come sit next to her. And then she asked each of the other kindergartners, what did you enjoy about the special gift that God's given her? And I watched as one by one they went around the circle, and I heard these little 5-year-old people say things like, oh, she danced really good. I thought her dress was pretty. I liked that moment when she twirled. Or another said, her dancing made me happy. And then it hit me. Mrs. Yankee was creating this community of grace. A community of grace right there in that kindergarten classroom. The next thing I thought, you know what? I want my kid to be a part of that. I want my kid to feel that kind of belonging, that kind of affirmation, that kind of acceptance. The next year, there was a limited number of spots, and not surprisingly so, for Mrs. Yankee's kindergarten class. And I'd gotten rumor of that, and so I got up early on the first day of registration. I showed up at that school at 4 a.m., sat in that parking lot until the janitor came to open the door, so I'd be the first person to register Amy for her class. I wanted to make sure my kid had that kind of experience. Well, it was that following school year, on a Friday, I was invited in to observe as my daughter got to display her special talent, original art. And she got to explain to all the other kids in the circle about these pictures that she'd painted. And after she did that, then she took her place next to Mrs. Yankee. And one by one, they went around the circle. I heard these little kids say, oh, I really liked that one, Amy. And they pointed to a particular picture. Or I liked all the colors she picked. Or this one here, this picture, this one made me smile. You know what? Every one of my kids, Amy, and then Josh, and then Caleb, I made sure they all had Mrs. Yankee. And I think I'd say this, I think to this day, I think she may be the finest teacher that I've ever been around, ever observed. Why? Because she understood that what kids need first and need foremost is belonging. They need to belong to a community of grace before they can ever even learn. And she created it right there in that kindergarten classroom for them. I'll tell you what, there are lots of tribes that can be good and meaningful for your kids. And I've seen it, and I've helped kind of create some of these. Baseball teams, soccer teams, football teams, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, choir, band, orchestra, good stuff. Even cliques of special friends at school or in neighborhoods. But I'm telling you, there's one tribe that is critical to a child's life. And it's being a part of a tribe that isn't dependent on how well or how far they can hit a baseball. It's being a part of a tribe that isn't dependent on whether they can actually sing or dance better than everyone else, or how good looking or how smart they are. And it's important and critical they belong to a tribe based on grace, a community of grace. And see, that's exactly what God dreams for the church to be, a community of grace. I want you to think about this for just a second. Think about how this church tribe, where you're gathered right now, okay? How this church tribe is different than any other tribe that you're a part of. Do me a favor, okay? Just go ahead and take a look around. Look to your right, look to your left. Just take a look around, okay? I want you to look at all the people around you in this room, okay? Go ahead, take a look. Has it ever occurred to you how completely odd it is that this conglomeration of people have become a tribe. I mean, just look around at these people. Because in this room are probably people, and I won't embarrass anybody by having you raise your hand, but probably people who enjoy balancing a checkbook. How weird is that? There's probably some people in this room who are Trekkies, and they would have worn their Spock ears this morning if their spouse hadn't stopped them. There's probably people here who like the band Nickelback, and they'd probably admit it. Very strange. What can we all possibly have in common in this room? And I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking, the Blackhawks. And if that's what you thought, that's a very good answer. Yes, we should have that in common. But I wasn't really thinking of that. I was thinking of something else. Here's what we all have in common. The thing we all have in common, the reason we're here, is grace. It's grace. Reggie Joyner, who's a thought leader in ministry to families with kids, he puts it this way. He says, our sense of belonging is rooted in the concept of grace. Grace means you don't belong because you deserve to belong. You belong because God has accepted and forgiven you. You're known by God in a way that you're not known by anyone. Every thought, every desire, every action, and yet He's welcomed you into His tribe forever. See, right here where we are, we all gather together in a community of grace. We belong not because we have anything that we've earned or there's anything that we've become that makes us worthy, but simply we gather because we are all equally, tremendously, outrageously loved by God. And what could be more important than introducing a child or a teen to the grace of God? I'm telling you, it is unequivocally the greatest thing you can do for their sense of well-being and their sense of belonging, making sure they're a part of a community of grace. And I want you to think about this. Why do we have Kid City? Why do we have student community here at Community? It's not just so that kids and students have something to do while the grown-ups go to service. It's because together, what we're trying to do is to help our kids experience a community of grace where they belong no matter what. No matter what. No matter. All right, so how do we do that? How do we give kids this gift of belonging? Well, I often get a similar kind of question from people who are brand new to church. They'll so often word it something like this. They'll say, how can I become a member here? They like what's going on and they want to participate at a deeper level. How can I become a member here? And I kind of like that question because it gives me a chance to tell them what I'm about to tell you. And here's what I almost always say. I'll say, well, we don't have membership at Community, but we have something a lot more powerful than that. What we offer is belonging. And you belong at Community not by signing a document, not by passing a class, not by getting voted in, but through growing in 3 relationships. And they all start with C, so they're easily remembered. Celebrate, which is about your relationship with God. And we come together and we celebrate who God is and how He's working in all of our lives. That's the first relationship. The second one is connect, which is about a relationship with each other. We love each other in this community of grace, and we do life together, and we get each other through life. We have each other's back. And there's contribute. It's about a relationship with the world. And as each of us do our part, we help fulfill the mission of God, and we help all people find their way back to Him. The author of the book of the Bible called Hebrews, it was someone who was brand new to this community of grace and experiencing God's grace. And he explains how others can also begin to belong to this community of grace and experience God's grace. And it's in Hebrews chapter 10. And I just want to read this to you. You can follow along on the screen here. And we're going to start at verse 22. It says this: "Let us draw near to God with a sincere heart and full assurance of faith, having our hearts sprinkled to cleanse us from a guilty conscience, and having our bodies washed with pure water. Let us hold unswervingly to the hope we profess, for He who promised is faithful. And let us consider how we may spur one another on towards love and good deeds. And let us not give up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, but let us encourage one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching." If we quickly kind of review this passage in Hebrews, what we see here is we see all 3 C's at work in this tribe, this community of grace of the first Christ followers. They were encouraged. You see there in verse 22, it says to draw near to God with a sincere heart. Draw near to God with a sincere heart. And that's celebrate. whether we do it privately or we do it corporately. And that's what you're doing right here, right now. You're at a celebration service. So I'll tell you what, just lean over somebody and just give them kind of a high five or a fist bump. Say, way to go, all right? Because you're here, you get that first C, okay? High five or a fist bump. Do that right now. All right, so let's celebrate. Secondly, they were challenged. It says, do not give up meeting together, but encourage one another. There in verse 25. That's connect. Even the first Christ followers, they kind of struggled with being committed to the gatherings of their tribe. I wonder, did they have the same temptations we have? You know, like, well, I don't know, I'm just too tired for small group tonight. Or, man, it's just too hard to get up in the morning for celebration services. Did their kids have lots of sports teams playing on Sunday mornings? You know, did they get distracted by other options on a sunny summer day? Well, to help our kids find their sense of belonging in this community of grace, it's reminding us, don't give up meeting together. Our kids, they need consistency. They need you to consistently help them connect with this tribe in order to really belong. And so I'm going to give you a couple challenges along the way. Here's the first challenge. If you want to give your kids a chance to belong to this tribe, this community of grace, okay? We said this a couple weeks ago, we're going to say it again. We promise on our end, we'll do everything we can to make Kid City fun, make Kid City friendly, make sure it's a place where you walk and observe like I did in Mrs. Yonke's class. Wow, this is a place where my kid belongs. And I'll tell you what, we'll do everything we can to make student community for our teens exciting, relevant, and a place of grace where your student will belong no matter what. But here's the deal. You need to get your kids there. You need to get them there to Kid City. You need to get them there to Stuco. That's the challenge. To celebrate, then to connect. But then lastly, we see here in Hebrews, they were asked to consider how could you spur one another on towards love and good deeds, verse 24. That's contribute. See, through Kid City and Stuco, we want to help your kids and your students discover that they have special talents, things that God has uniquely given them to contribute to the mission that God has dreamed that all this world could be. They could be a part of that. Some of you adults, you have an incredible capacity, and you could serve this emerging generation in an impactful way. Your patience, your ability to simplify things, your spirit, your fun-loving personality, your welcoming demeanor, your ability to listen. Those are things that can impact young people in a profound way. Some of you have stories, you have experiences that make you a prime candidate to help our kids and help our students find their way back to God. So I gave you the first challenge. Here's the second challenge today. Would you consider contributing to making community a place of belonging for our kids and our students? As you think about that, I want you to take a peek at Kid City right here at Community.
What I love about my Kid City small group is that every Sunday we get to play games and we listen to a good Bible story.
I have a lot of friends in my Kid City small group. I love to color in my small group. No, I like playing Minecraft. The fish tank.
I love my Kid City. Yeah! I love Kid City.
I love my Kid City small group leader. I love Kid City.
How I can be myself and how I always have fun in small group.
I like the most is the theater because we can sing, dance, watch videos.
We just learn a lot more about God and it makes it be a lot of fun.
My small group leader is nice and funny and she's very fairness.
Wait, what?
Kid City is treating us good and that it is wonderful.
What I love about my small group leader is that she's always fun and likes encouraging us to try new things and always lets us learn in our own way.
What I love about my small group is I have a lot of friends and people are really nice.
I like dancing at Kid City.
I also like to dance to Michael Jackson.
And when I grow up, I want to be a pop star.
I'm a really good dancer.
I love my Kid City small group leader because he's so excited each time and he never gives up on what we're doing.
I think I've learned that there's challenges in your life that you can't give up on. My small group leader has helped with that a lot.
I love learning about Jesus with some of my friends.
God loves everybody. And he loves me and you. I love Kid City. I love my Kid City small group. Kid City is so much fun. Fireman loves Kid City. We love Kid City.
I love Kid City. That's all I have to say.
I'll tell you what, I love what's going on in our Kids City. Let me go back to our challenge. Here's the first challenge. Get your kids there. Over the past couple of years, there's been a ton of research done in regards to children and students and spirituality. The first piece of research is regarding when a child says yes to following Jesus and says yes to experiencing God's grace for the first time, and this is very, very important, 85% of the people who say yes to Jesus, say yes to following him, do so between the ages of 4 and 14. During that era of Kid City and Stuco. I'm telling you, get your kids here. That's the first challenge. Second challenge, will you contribute? Will you contribute to Kid City or our student community? A second piece of research is about what happens during those late high school and college years. Research shows there's actually a sharp decline in the 17 and 24-year-olds in any of them having a vibrant Christian faith. Some experts have even put the percentages at below 7% that say they have a vibrant Christian faith. But there is one factor that dramatically changes the direction of that trend. The one consistent factor in the life of young adults who continue to have a strong, vibrant faith all the way through college is that they had a person from their tribe, other than their parents, who helped them wrestle through the implications, the questions, and challenges of being a Christ follower. See, what our kids need is just what the Bible says. They need somebody, and maybe it's you, to encourage them. Don't give up meeting together. Someone who will spur them on to love and good deeds. Why can't that person be you? Well, as we wrap up this today, I want to share a story with you about a kid, a student who grew up in Kid City and then Stuco here at Community, who's found a place of belonging. This student probably had, I would say, more hurdles to belonging than most kids. But a Stuco leader from our Lamont campus, Nick Fiddick, decided to help him find his place in the tribe. And this remarkable, beautiful story emerged. And here's the story about Sam in Nick's own words. Let me just read this to you. He says, the first time I saw Sam, he sat in his wheelchair at the back of the church. Sam has cerebral palsy and needs constant care and attention. Literally bound to his wheelchair, Sam eats through a feeding tube and doesn't have the strength to hold himself up. We were gearing up for Blast, our winter student conference, and making a big push for all of our students to go. Well, Sam kept coming to mind. And I thought to myself, he's 15. He should have the same chance to go to this life-changing event as every other student. Well, I caught Sam's mom, Gretchen, off guard when I asked her if Sam could go to Blast. She didn't know. She'd have to talk with her husband. Well, after praying and talking, they decided to ask Sam if he wanted to go to Blast. Sam cannot communicate verbally. He answers questions through movements or gestures, turning his head one way for yes and another way for no. So Gretchen asked Sam if he knew about Blast. Sam motioned yes. She then asked him if he wanted to go to Blast. His response was an energetic, almost whole-body shift, rolling out of his chair, emphatic yes, he wanted to go to Blast. At Blast, Sam hung out in the room with other high school guys. He sat in on small groups. He joined the guys for meals. He enjoyed time in the water park. He was connecting and a part of the gang. During worship, Sam would wear special glasses to block the lights to avoid seizures and wore earplugs because of his sensitivity to the noise. He sat in his chair and observed, occasionally grunting or groaning in response to something he heard from the stage. In the last worship session, something special happened. Students were challenged to take a stand for Jesus. Literally take a stand.
I don't want to live an ordinary life. I want to live an extraordinary life. Here's the reality of this chair. You don't sit in this chair. You got to take a stand.
Nearly everyone made their way toward the stage and began to stand, hands raised, celebrating God. during one of the songs, I scanned our Lamont section to see if anyone was standing or sitting alone. And I spotted Sam. Sam was standing. He was standing. Sam had been rustling and noticeably vocal, and his mother asked him if he wanted to get out of his chair. Motion that he did, Sam used the strength of just one leg to hold himself up, his mother standing with him as a spotter. And there he stood with all the other students at blast. He could only hold himself up for a few moments, but he did it. And for the first time in 15 years of life, Sam stood up. He stood up to celebrate God. The Friday after blast, we held our first student community celebration service back in Lamont. Sam came, and Gretchen shared their story with the students. For the first time, Sam was not sitting in the back, hidden from the group. He came to the front as his mom shared the story, and it was just amazing. But then Nick writes, but that's not where the story ends. Leading up to a March baptism celebration, we talked a lot about the meaning of going public with one's faith in baptism. As we talked about it, Sam got very loud and seemed kind of agitated. Gretchen tried to calm him so he wouldn't be a distraction to others. But Gretchen, his mom, figured out Sam was vocal when we talked about baptism for a reason. She asked Sam if he wanted to be baptized. And again, he responded with a yes. So last March 2nd, Sam was baptized by his parents during our 25th anniversary celebration. Sam's school bus driver and husband came to community just to see Sam get baptized. After the service, his bus driver sent Gretchen the following message, writing these words: I was so moved by Sam's commitment to God. It has renewed my faith in so many ways. I hadn't realized how empty I felt till that morning when I felt God fill me back up. You'll see me a lot more often at church. Sam has been my path back to God, and I can't tell you how much your son has done for me and my husband. Sam contributed to the mission of helping people find their way back to God. I'm telling you, by God's design, every person has a place in our community of grace. And like the Bible says, let's not neglect the meeting together. Never neglect it. Because what we do with this week always matters.